All right, let's hope this works before my battery dies. Part 2 of training to build muscle tissue. And the most important keys and principles that we want to understand as it relates to training to build muscle tissue, okay? With that said, make sure you watch part 1 if you haven't yet. The reality is part 1 is about training to failure, and training to failure is the basis even by which this second video exists on, right? Like training to failure is the primary pillar that sets up the foundation for muscle growth as it relates to training. We have to understand that training to failure is the most important aspect of this, right? If we can't grasp the reality and get past the intimidation, right, of training to failure, then at the end of the day, anything else that you do is going to be essentially, it's going to make you healthier maybe. It might make you feel a little bit better. But at the end of the day, it's not nearly going to be as conducive to building muscle tissue as just getting over any insecurities you have about it and understanding how important it is to train to failure and simply doing that. I hope that made sense. But anyway, bottom line is, as it relates to the way that we move on, actually, I kind of want to start there. So at the end of the day, right, where we're going with this is essentially on the most simplistic level. If I made a training plan for somebody and I said, hey, I understand you have a really high training acumen. I understand I've trained with you before. You push your sets to failure. You're good. All I need you to do on the most simplistic level is, here's the exercises that we want to do. And maybe we're setting that up based on their physique or their goals or whatever it might be. Here's the exercise that I want you to do. I want you to do 2 sets of each exercise and just take shit to failure. They might say, well, what about for how many reps? 10 reps. All of them? Yeah, every set, 10 reps. But it's just a suggestion. The idea here is to train to failure, and you have to do that beyond anything else, right? So let's say this person puts, 3 plates on each side of the hack squat, right? And their goal is to take that to failure, and they get to rep 8 against the suggested rep total at 10, but they're nowhere near failure. They're not going to stop at 10 reps just because that's what the plan says. They're going to take that set to fucking failure. So maybe they do that for legitimately, 14 reps before they get to failure. All right? Now what we have is a scenario that opens up the door of, okay, what happens from there? Am I supposed to just go in every week, put 3 plates on, and continually train to failure? No, the next side of this that's extremely important for us to start to break down and understand, right, for multiple different reasons, which we'll get into, is tracking your training sessions. Okay, don't turn this off. Don't turn a blind eye. Tracking your training is what allows us for continued progression, even with training to failure. We still want to make sure that we look at this through the lens of, I want to maximize everything that I can maximize in terms of building muscle tissue because it's a very hard process. So we want to match the idea of progressive overload with the idea of training to failure. Okay, so every set's still going to be trained to failure, but now we want to start to look at the opportunities for progressive overload within that conversation. So now the key to understanding progressive overload, first and foremost, is tracking your fucking training. And now let's make this all make sense, right? So the guy that hopped on with 3 plates on each side and took it for 14 reps to get to failure, what he'd want to do is simply write that down in his folder, okay? Write that down in his notebook. Okay, hack squat, 3 plates, took it to failure. I like to put a little bit more notes in there, whatever you want to do. Let's keep it clean. Maybe use your phone. You have an app that you like to use, whatever, as long as you're tracking your training session, right? So we put in there that we did that. Now what's going to end up happening is next week when he comes in, he simply needs to take a look, he or she needs to take a look at their training plan, right, or at their training journal, right, and see, okay, last week I did 3 plates for 14 reps, right? What am I going to do this week? Technically, right, they could just say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get 15 reps, 16 reps, as many reps as I can, but I'm going to get above the 14 reps that I got last week. That's progressive overload, okay? They could also say, I'm going to put a 25 on each side, right? And I'm going to see how many reps I can get out of that. And maybe they come up, maybe that is the case. They do that and they get whatever, let's say 10 reps this time. Awesome. Take it. That's to failure, right? Whatever it might be. But the key understanding here is that we're tracking our training so that we know what we should eventually be going towards, right? As opposed to just saying, I'm coming in to train to failure, right? Coming in to train to failure is great, and that is the key principle. And if you just did that over and over again, you probably still grow. But again, if we want to take advantage of every concept that we can to be able to maximize growth, then we want to train and we want to give ourselves as much of a novel stimulus as we can. right, to force additional adaptations. So again, if I did 3 plates last week for 14 reps, a more novel stimulus this week would be either doing 3 plates and a quarter for 10 reps or doing the same 3 plates for 16 reps. Either one of those would be a novel stimulus by which I'm going to create further adaptations, right, in terms of building muscle tissue. All right. So now we have this idea of tracking that emerges that really does start to generate this concept of, performance, right? And essentially what I'm trying to do is outperform, right, previous working efforts, right? So ultimately, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to track everything. And again, I know people hate the idea of tracking for some reason. I don't really understand why. It's not that big of a deal. And more than anything else, what it starts to do is put your training in a very real perspective for you, okay? Now, let's zoom out for just 1 second. I'm going to take a step away from just the training aspect. When it comes to, what we're talking about here, usually a training plan exists within the concept of a bigger plan, right? People are training because they're trying to lose fat and they want to build muscle tissue to support a healthy metabolism. They're trying to, sculpt their body in a certain way and build their body in a certain way to make them look better. But ultimately, that's what we're trying to improve our overall health and our overall look, essentially. Right? So that's usually going to be, this training plan is usually going to accompany a bigger plan, especially for my clients, right? We have an entire, kind of G drive, really, realistically set up for them that includes their nutrition, that includes their weight tracker, that includes how they check in, all this different stuff, right? And the bottom line is within these processes for people, right? They come in and they end up, let's say they're in a fat loss phase. They're extremely focused in a fat loss phase, right? They're extremely focused, and maybe their training sessions are a little bit more intentful, but overall, they're far more focused, right? Why? Because they have something directly in front of them every single day that's driving motivation, something more tangible, right? They're sticking to the plan and everything because they know if they do, they wake up the next day and they're down another pound. They start to change the way their body looks physically. And these things are extremely motivating, right? And they motivate us to the point where we have more discipline and more adherence to be able to get more results. And it becomes a cycle that we're in there, right? The bottom line, though, is as soon as we pull away that dieting game, right? Let's say somebody loses 30 pounds, they look great, but now we say, hey, now's the time that we slowly have to work your calories back up. We want to maintain this lowest body weight that we're at or maintain close to the lowest body weight, but we really want to maintain a lower body fat percentage, right? And now we work them back up, right? They're at this point where it's like, hey, you just dieted for 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is. What we really want to do here is for maybe even the rest of the year, we want to keep you at maintenance or slightly above maintenance and have you go in and train. And the problem with this is you don't really see a huge difference in terms of muscularity within any short time frame. Building muscle takes a very, 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 very long time, realistically speaking. Most people will give you some bullshit ideology like, oh, you can gain 10 pounds of muscle in a year. No, you're not. Especially if you're not natural. Especially if you are natural, sorry. Especially if you're a female. Not going to happen, right? So you're not going to see this dramatic difference within your physique on a regular basis. You're not looking at the scale to go up so consistently. In most cases, if anything, we're trying to keep it relatively similar, right? So what I want people to focus on back to the training, tracking the training, is simply that performance. Right? Like this whole chunk of time that we have here, let's make sure that we're putting this right in front of us and really focus on performing at our highest level and using this as kind of the tangible motivation. Get motivated by the fact that you can go in and put 3 plates on in a quarter now and take that for 10 reps to failure. Now, the next week you come in and you take it for 12 reps to failure. Then the next week you come in and you put another, whatever, take off the 25, put on another plate. Now you got 4 plates. Let's see what we can get that for, right? Then let's try to, get that up a couple reps, over the course of the next few weeks, or more reps and more reps and more reps, or add another plate on there. But again, at the end of the day, tracking should be something that gives us this kind of guide or this roadmap or this excitement, right, for a time frame. And it should be all the time, realistically, even when you're dieting. But for a time frame when we don't really maybe have that other thing that is going to be so prevalent on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis, right? And it kind of saves us from just kind of falling into this trap of going through the motions, right? So again, tracking is something that is going to be extremely valuable as it relates to your overall process here, but most certainly as it relates to your ability to be able to tap into this concept of progressive overload. Okay, now what we do with clients, like I said, even if somebody were to go as simplistic as say, here's 5 exercises that I'm going to do every day, your rep guide or suggestion is 10 reps per set, but take every set to failure. And then again, as long as you're tracking and progressing, you're going to have something to build off of there week in and week out. That could be the most simplistic way of doing it, and it will absolutely work for people, okay? But what we do with people, what I want my clients to understand right now is that what I'm giving you guys is essentially a little bit different from the, suggestive rep range, right? I'm giving you what I like to call the maximum repetition threshold. You guys have all heard me talked about this, right? Maximum repetition threshold, essentially, I don't want you going over your rep range. Right? If I'm giving you a rep range of 12 reps, 10 reps, 8 reps, whatever it is, you guys know our rep ranges can go all the way to 20 reps, right? But it'd be as low as 4 reps, more commonly probably like 6 reps, right? Yeah, 6 to 20 reps, we'll call it, right? The bottom line is whatever I'm giving you for a rep, that's your maximum repetition threshold. I don't want you going beyond that. But you absolutely should be coming up underneath those rep ranges. So if I'm telling you to do 12 reps, and every time you go to the gym, you're hitting 12 reps, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong, right? You're supposed to be training to failure. So at the end of the day, let's say, again, same exact scenario exists. Week 1, I go in, I have 3 plates on the hack squat, and I get that for, let's say I'm taking it for, 10 reps and I fail. Okay. Well, what I want you to do from here is understand that you have a 12 rep maximum repetition threshold. I want you to stay at that 3 plates that you got for 10 reps. I want you to log it into your tracker. And then next week when you come in, I want you to look back at that and say, hey, I need to get this 3 plates up to my maximum repetition threshold of 12 on this set. Okay. And I don't want you to stop at anything until you meet that rep range of 12. Okay. So your goal is to get that 3 plates to 12. Now, here's the deal. Once you get that to 12, so let's say 3 weeks later, you finally get it for 12, right? So that in and of itself is effectively progressive overload, right? You started with 3 plates and you failed at 10 reps. And now over the course of the next 4 weeks, you push that all the way to 12 reps in failure, right? But now what I want you to do is I want you to build some confidence there, right? I want you to be able to take that 3 plates to 12 reps more than once. Okay, more than once. Once you've hit that more than once, now you have the choice, right? Well, you don't really have a choice. The goal now is to come in and put more weight on there. Let's say it's 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 25 pounds, probably more realistically, right? And now that same exact, rep range still exists, 12 reps, right? We just got it for 12 reps. We only hit it for 12 reps twice, maybe 3 times if you really want to build some confidence there. But now we're going to slap on a 25, and now we're just going to go again until failure. And maybe this time, because it's so much heavier, I get to failure at around 9 reps. That's fine. Take it. You failed. That's what we're looking for there in terms of a little bit of a novel stimulus, right? We got a new weight. We're taking it for 9 reps. We hit failure. Awesome. Now your goal next week is to either get that same 9 reps with that same weight, but for a little bit more confidence, or get 10 reps, get 11 reps. Get it for 12 reps if you can. Right? Let's say you have a really good week and you go from 9 reps to 11 reps. Awesome. And then you come back the next week and you get it for 11 reps again. Awesome. Right? Then come back the following week, we get it for 12 reps. Awesome. Now I want you to hit that 12 reps multiple times, right? At least another time. Right? And now you move up again, another 10 pounds on each side. Right? Or wherever it is you deem necessary to be able to go at that point. Most typically, we want those smaller increases if we can. Right? So we throw another 10 pounds on there. We go through that process all over again. All right. But obviously we're giving you more than one set. So you want to make sure though, that you're looking at this through the lens of, oh, Tim wants me to do, whatever. The maximum repetition threshold is 12, but the next set, maybe it's 10 and the next set, maybe it's 8. Right? At the end of the day, what I really want you guys looking at is each and every set is its own individual set. Yeah, I like to program descending rep ranges just because I think logically at the end of the day, especially if we have a higher rep range, 12, 15, 20 reps in some cases on some sets, that there is going to be some aerobic capacity. At the end of the day, I would want to make sure that the focus is still on training to failure, and it's going to be a lot easier after doing a set of 12 right, to failure, to do a set of 8 to failure, as opposed to doing another set of 12, potentially. You know what I mean? That's going to gas you. And that could have, deleterious impact on coming sets, right? So that's why I like that descending rep ranges. But at the end of the day, remember, these are all maximum repetition thresholds. So it's going to be very rare that you're doing a set of 12 and then another set of 12, even if we have you programmed for 2 back-to-back sets of 12. Does that make sense? So Bottom line is, I think the most important part of understanding training for progression is, first and foremost, track your fucking training, right? When you walk into the gym today, I want you to look around, right? Especially if you go to the gym at the same time every day. You are going to see hundreds of people, that's probably not true. You're going to see a lot of people that you see there every single day. And most of those people, right, have not changed at all, but yet you've been going to the same gym and seeing these same people for the last, 2, 3, 4 years, etc., right? The reason, and then I want you to look at what they're doing, and I want you to make sure that you never, ever, ever do the same fucking thing as them. Be the person that's being a little bit different. Be the person that's writing down all their training. Be the person that's tracking their training in between sets. Don't follow what other people are doing that haven't gotten a result that you're looking for. Do something different. Take action. Start tracking your training, okay? And then once you track your training, don't just leave it at that. I'm writing down my training. Who the fuck cares? Use it to your advantage to make sure you're training with the concept of progressive overload in mind, or as another key principle for your growth, okay? And again, if you're my client, look at the idea of what we have set on your plan, which you can either go back to your original intro video that I did for you, but I guarantee if I wanted you training with the intent of building muscle, and we haven't talked about something else because maybe you have a health concern that we're talking, whatever it might be, right? We're trying to minimize inflammation, whatever. The bottom line is, I've talked to you guys about maximum repetition threshold, or it exists on your plan in plain verbiage, maximum repetition threshold. Utilize that to your advantage as being a guiding factor to help you with your progressions, okay? But at the end of the day, I want this to serve as part two. We have part one. Part one is understanding you have to get the fact that training to failure is the most important part of building muscle tissue. Okay, once we get from that there, the next thing that we could do is layer in the idea of progressive overload to be able to make sure that we have performance and things that are going to motivate us and drive us forward and be something that is an actual, maybe even fun part about training here in terms of, looking at these numbers and working it up. But you should be obsessed with these concepts. You should be pushing these concepts for all they're worth, because like we've already talked about, building muscle tissue is hard. You can't keep going into the gym intimidated. You can't keep going into the gym without a clear plan. You can't keep going into the gym without a healthy level of execution, which is another video that we're going to make. You got to make sure, right, that we have these things lined up and that we're going in there with intent behind the idea of training to failure and training with progressions in mind.